This is Immortality with Meep, looking at the excess deaths associated with COVID-19 from the CDC. I'll provide the link in the description of the video. Okay, so this is from the CDC. I looked at this a couple of months ago in May. Now it's July, so let's see where the data are now. And actually, I believe they've updated some of the graphs that in some of the data provided here. So I'm going to scroll past all these explanations, caveats, etc. And let's go to what you're going to see default if you go here immediately. So what we have is this graph, and let me explain what the different items are. The blue are the actual counted deaths. So the recent ones, boop, 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 those aren't completed weeks. The ones back here actually even a couple months ago, or even 3 months ago, because of some underreporting. There are certain delays for special circumstances of deaths that weren't counted. That said, stuff from back in April is pretty complete. It's only going to increase a little bit at this point. So the blue is week to week. It goes back to January 1st, 2017. And one of the reasons you want to do this is you kind of see the shape of deaths, that you tend to get peaks at the end of the year, beginning of the year. So here is the beginning of 2018 because of flu and pneumonia. So people generally actually don't die directly from the flu. It tends to be older people who get pneumonia after catching the flu, and then pneumonia kills them. Sometimes cause of deaths, they actually record multiple causes of death. There's a primary cause, and then you can have contributing causes. Okay. So we've got a little peaks and goes up and down, yada yada. Okay, and this is definitely COVID over here. Then what's this yellow line? This is their threshold for excess deaths. You come up, you have your average expected. That's not what the yellow line is. It's basically, I think it's the 95th percentile. So you can come up with the confidence range for normal mortality. And if you go past that normal mortality, we'll call it excess. So the little red pluses are for each week that it goes above that yellow line. Okay, so you should be able to see that it goes above the yellow line, sure, but sometimes it just nudges a little bit above. Okay, so they're saying if you're in the top 5th percentile from what we predict from regular mortality, there you go. So we're seeing COVID there. And the peak, let me see if I can grab it. April, the week ending April 11th, 2020. So remember that. You can select the jurisdiction, and it's the states. We got Puerto Rico, District of Columbia, and New York City is its own. So let's pick New York City. Yeah, that's really, really bad. That's several 100% excess deaths. So that's New York City. That's very extreme. It has been the worst, and nothing has come close to it yet. So let us look at New York, which is the state minus the city. Okay, this is still very pronounced, but not as bad percentage-wise as New York City. Let's do New Jersey. Okay, New Jersey's a little worse from a percentage standpoint than New York State was. New York State without New York City. If you put New York City back with New York State, it's probably worse than New Jersey. Okay, so let's try a big state like Texas and take a look. And again, yes, these scales move, but they're different populations. I want you to look at the flu season for 2017-2018 flu season. That was a bad flu year, but we actually get a flu year like that every couple of years. I hadn't gotten into this in prior videos too much, but you guys really should take the flu seriously. It does kill a lot of, yes, older people, but that's what COVID is killing now too. Now, COVID has more extreme treatments. Most of the people having to go who die from the pneumonia, from the flu, are not ending up in the ICU. No, not necessarily. They can end up in the hospital, but a lot of them just die at home. Okay, but this is what this looks like. And remember, So the most recent weeks are not completed, so we don't have all the deaths in. You keep reporting, and another thing to watch out for, like, oh, this doesn't match up with what I'm seeing on other dashboards. You need to make sure, are they telling you when the death occurred or when it was reported? Because those are very different things. Some of the deaths, like I think I heard, oh, we just discovered that some of the deaths, and this is in Texas, were, I think it was Texas, it might have been Florida. Yeah, let's look at Florida. Were COVID, it was like 3,000, but they weren't recent deaths. They were from like April and May. Okay, and so again, Florida, from a percentage standpoint, not so bad. Yes, there may be future waves. There may be something that comes out of the current spike of cases right now. But unfortunately, we're not really going to see that for a couple of months. We did see that excess death from April pretty quickly, though. Okay, so let's update the dashboard. Let's see, is it going to reset it to, no, it doesn't reset it to the whole thing. So what you get now is you have this chartreuse, which is non-COVID deaths, and then this blue, which are official COVID deaths that have been reported to the CDC. So remember, this yellow line, okay, this is projected from our expected mortality at certain parts of the year and a margin. So the distance, this might be under expected. I don't know. They didn't provide the expected line on this graph. So you need to know how they define excess. Excess deaths, when I talk about excess deaths, it's above, whatever is above average. That said, if you're looking for extreme situations, it is appropriate to define it by, say, some tail percentile. So 95th percentile is pretty far out there, but it's not necessarily a lot bigger than average. Let's go back to the United States so we can see what that looks like. Okay, so perhaps in these early months where we see the, quote, non-COVID deaths, and this is before a lot of lockdowns, it may be COVID deaths really were undercounted. That said, over here where we see the blue crossing over this excess deaths, they may not be they may be undercounted, they may be overcounted, or they may be counted just right. I can't tell just comparing it against the 95th percentile. Okay, and again, let's just do New York City and then we'll move on. Oops, that's New York. I might as well see New York. That's an interesting thing. But again, I think in some of the early weeks, we really had some deaths, specifically, you'll see heart attacks, ischemic heart disease, which is basically heart attacks, dying from heart attacks, and Alzheimer's. And I think a lot of those were, yes, maybe you did die of a heart attack, but the heart attack was caused by COVID-19. It seems that COVID-19 affects the blood, but we're not going to get into that. New York City, almost definitely, they undercounted COVID deaths early on. So you can see that with these thresholds. That is just an amazing spike. Okay, that's extreme. That's really bad. This is not what you want to see. If there's additional waves, you don't want to see a spike like that. That's really, really bad. I don't want to talk too much about the excess deaths with and without waiting. The whole point of this, and you can't see it with New York City, so let's, because they're pretty quick on reporting deaths, let's just look at the whole country. I'm not going to do that. What this is supposed to do is take into account the lag in reporting deaths. But I swear to you, like if they were in insurance, I would not let this person set IBNR, which is incurred but not reported claims. I think it's underweighted for trying to guess what the deaths were for the week ending July 4th. That's almost definitely not correct. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to update the dashboard. Number of excess deaths. So this is number, absolute number. It just helps to give you an idea of magnitude. This is not necessarily helpful. So here, and notice they give a range, and that is because it's against predict, but so you see this 95% CI, that's confidence interval. So that's here. And then number of deaths over the average expected number, which of course is going to be a bigger number. And so that's why you have a range. You have the amount from comparing it against the 95th percentile, and then there's the amount compared against the expected value. This gives you an idea of where we've really seen the COVID deaths. New York City, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, which I didn't show you already, Illinois, Massachusetts. And then you have the largest state by population, California. It's pretty far down here. Where the heck is Florida? There's Texas, that's pretty low. And now I'm trying to find Florida. Where the heck is Florida? I don't even know where Florida is. Oh, there's Florida. It's below Colorado. And it definitely has a much bigger population than Colorado. Again, maybe we're going to get that death spike from a second wave in Florida, but I have reasons, which I'm not going to discuss here because the data aren't here, of why we're probably not going to see the spike like we saw in New York City. Okay, so now we get the percentage. And this is, I have in my spreadsheet, and I'll do this later this weekend. I don't like how they colored it because the 201 to 500% and over 500% are so close in color. I still have trouble. They look like the exact same color to me. Maybe my color perception is not that good. But again, we can see week by week. New York City is really bad. And if we select the week ending April 11th, you'll see it's 600% excess mortality. Again, that is really, really bad. If you scroll through this, you can see which states really had it bad. And you'll see they're excluding like Alaska and some other states that are relatively small and kind of wonky in their data. I do want to complain about Connecticut. They have, and they're not showing it here. If it's showing no excess mortality, they just leave it white. The problem is Connecticut has been very lax in the reporting of total deaths. Yes, I'm sure they're reporting their COVID deaths in time, but they're not reporting their total deaths in a timely manner for these data sets. And it really annoys me because, I go to Connecticut every week and I would like to know the actual stats. Okay, weekly number of deaths by age. And now we're getting into some really interesting stuff because age is a huge factor in mortality just normally. Let's look at these light gray lines. So the light gray lines shows the number of deaths by week. And yeah, week 0 is starting at the beginning of the year and it goes to week 52. So you have these gray lines and it's like each line, it's from 2015 to 2019. So you get an idea of what the level of deaths normally looks like for each age group. And again, this little falling off at the end of each of these curves, it's not real. Some of this is based on the reporting. I wouldn't be surprised if it, levels off. And you can really see the seasonality of deaths with the oldest people. And that's where most deaths come from, are from the oldest people too. You're most likely to die during your 80s. And actually it's late 80s, so it's after 85 and older. Even if life expectancy, which is an expectation over the entire life, so much younger ages, like if people who die in teenage years or whatever, really brings the life expectancy down. But once you get into adulthood, chances are pretty good you're going to be dying in your 80s. Happy news. In any case, you can see the spikes. And the percentage spike for the 85 and over, even though they're starting from a higher level, it's even a higher spike. This is disproportionately hitting the elderly, much, much worse. Yes, this is actually kind of bad for 25 to 44 and definitely for 45 to 64. That is a noticeable jump in number of deaths. And no, it's not necessarily going to dip under. These are not people who are necessarily going to die soon anyway. Yes, you could say that about 85 and older, but again, our Q sub X's, our mortality rates per year for the oldest people, doesn't get up to 50%. Okay, I'm exaggerating because this is not a 50% mortality rate, but it doesn't get that high until you're really, really, really old. That said, you're having to face progressively more difficult odds the older you get. So you're even if you win the crapshoot that one year, the next year maybe not so much. So let's see. This is a little iffier once we start digging into a smaller area, but let's try New York City. That's really, really bad. These are extreme spikes. Look at that percentage difference. This is horrible. Let's try California. Same thing going on here. They really weren't that hard hit. So we can start seeing a difference in the states, at least when the first wave weren't hard hit. Let's try New Jersey. And you see the spikes, so they were hard hit. And I didn't see Pennsylvania in one of my earlier ones, so let's look at Pennsylvania. And I'm just trying to give you an idea. This is how I interpret the graphs. So I really encourage you, like, you go in, pick your own state and your own concern. Now, this is a weird pattern where it drops down and then comes up. This may be an undercounting problem. There may be deaths that have not been reported yet from Pennsylvania. That dip is very weird looking to me because it's outside the bounds of what we saw in prior years. So something for you to play with. Now we're getting into by cause, and let's see, I think it will reset to the United States. Yes, it does. So, and I did read through this. These are excluding COVID-19. Where potentially are we seeing COVID deaths being miscoded as something else? And I'm thinking circulatory disease and Alzheimer's. Other select causes, it's a little bump. Respiratory disease is a little much. And again, this is excluding COVID. So I'm thinking, and this is where I had been reading more and more about how like the blood was clotting. There were blood issues with regards to COVID-19, and it was perhaps being recorded as something else. And again, I'm just going to do New York City for this one. Circulatory diseases, there's a little bump for Alzheimer's and other causes, but really the circulatory diseases. So that's heart disease. But notice there wasn't malignant neoplasms as cancer. We're not seeing any, it's normal levels for cancer deaths. And some little spike in respiratory diseases. So let's update weekly by subcause. So now, where might they be miscoding? The flu and pneumonia, I think, is definitely one that, you know, COVID could have looked like it and it got misdiagnosed. Could have been, or they didn't have testing available. So we're seeing some spikes here that some of the causes of death, again, this is showing that COVID may have been undercounted, and that's New York City. Let's go back to the United States so we can see it big time. So it's not as pronounced when we look at the U.S., chronic lower respiratory disease and other ones, not so much. So it may be flu and pneumonia. That's one of them. Let's look at circulatory. Ischemic heart disease or heart attacks. Again, so this is, we see the ischemic heart disease, and I know I'm probably mispronouncing it. I'm sorry, I'm not a medical person. I did look it up, though. That has to do with, basically, it's heart attacks. I'm not going to use the medical terminology. Cerebrovascular strokes, heart failure, it's probably like congestive heart failure, other things like that. Hypertensive diseases, and it's misspelled. Oh my gosh. I'm not going to write them about it. Maybe someone will tell them. Even though we didn't see spikes in malignant neoplasms, which is cancer, nothing, there's basically nothing. So cancer is just ticking along the way it normally does. And here's one, Alzheimer's disease. I think some COVID deaths are being coded as Alzheimer's. And here's another one. diabetes. Now, diabetes can cause a lot of additional problems, so more likely to have heart disease and other things. I am not a medical person, obviously, but how they determine cause of death, we're trying to get at the primary cause of death. That said, they will list multiple causes. So it could be you had heart failure, but it was caused by diabetes. Well, these diabetes deaths may have been COVID deaths. We've been hearing a lot about comorbidities of these are conditions you have at the same time that may have contributed to COVID being more severe for you. And diabetes was one of them, I'm sure. Oops, sorry. The last couple ones I don't like so much. Change in the number of deaths by cause. It's basically the same kind of information they had in the prior ones, just graphed a different way. And total number average by cause. Again, now this gives you, instead of percentage standpoints and a different kind of visual, it actually gives you the numbers. And we do see this relatively large number for Alzheimer's disease. That said, these are relatively small compared to the total COVID deaths officially so far. And this last one I don't like very much because it's got way too many things in each bar. So we start with, these are all of the causes of deaths other than COVID, okay? I'm not quite sure why they put this in here. And it's not, total number of deaths above average for these categories. But it gives you an idea, and if you hover over it, you'll see the actual numbers of what might be miscounted for, and that was COVID really, and they're counting it as something else. So it's, something to keep in mind. They do have some other graphs other than what is on this page, but this is the best one to start at if you want to take a look at your particular state, look at the trends you've got. I'm not going to go over these other ones. Just click through the daily updates of totals by week and state. These are the data I'm pulling down for my own spreadsheets and for my own purposes. And it does have Puerto Rico, and I've started adding Puerto Rico to my graphics. And then they have a breakdown by age and race. So here's an age. Okay, and I'm not going to go through these. These are not ideally presented on these pages, and I'm going to see if I can make some more comprehensible graphs for use on my blog and do its own video. So there you go, mortality with Meep.